All right, welcome back to the 80 Star Basketball Channel, the only star basketball channel that has the biggest interview of its existence. And I forgot to hit record. Just kidding, I did not. I was basically kind of going in. I didn't know what to expect with this at all, and it was so much different than I expected. As kind of life throws out you, things turn out differently than expected, and this was no different. This was much different. And it was very, very good. Just to kind of sum that very simply, I came away very impressed, and it more turned into a working meeting, and it was just really good. So I thought I was going to be able to record. I got on, and he was basically saying, "Hey, let me just kind of do my questions, and I will record for my podcast, and then I will come on your channel, and you have your questions, and it'll just be me and you." And I was like, "All right, thumbs up, let's go." Which kind of obviously threw out my whole prep, but everything I was kind of thinking of saying or doing. I got a little bit in for sure. We definitely had back and forth. This was a really good spot, and I know what you're all thinking. Is there anything? What's the big news? Did he say anything? Yes, there was one thing that was said, and I was surprised. But I'm surprised because it went into his thinking, and I'll explain that later. But it was something that I focused on. Like it was said early, and he said it, and it really went into his level of thinking. And much of this turned into that. So it was really just kind of this discovery of Beckett and how he was talking and his thought process. So really quick on that. I'm going to have him on Monday, and I will create the vid for that. And then also Taft is going to come on the channel in a couple weeks, and hopefully Cajun Cardboard. And I also want to get Dustin. I got his nice mug in there. Hopefully at some point I'll reach out, Dustin, my favorite content creator. And I want to start having some of these discussions around Star, because I actually, it was so completely different than I thought. And I kind of went in, as we all do, we have like this plan of what we're going to say. And unless we get new information, and Beckett said that straight up to start, he essentially said, all right, well, we got 4 people that are pretty headstrong. Let's see how this goes. And it was a good start, but it was just all of us trying to almost like a working meeting. And that's the only way I can really describe this. It wasn't, it was definitely point counterpoint in a lot of spots. And by the way, Beckett will be putting he said he's going to try and get it out by next Monday. The first, we went 2 hours. So it's a lot of info. And actually, I did not sleep hardly anything, because I was trying to process all this and how I'm going to present it to you guys this morning in this channel. And this video is probably going to go a little bit, going to be obviously more of like a podcast type format. I'm not, there's nothing to show. It's just talking. But he'll put that out, so you'll be able to hear for yourself. But I'm going to give you my takeaways, and I'm going to give you Dave's takeaways, and I'm going to give you Steve Taft's takeaway. But I'm going to wait for Steve's at the end, because the one thing that we kind of all agreed on, even after meeting, Dave, Steve, and I got together for about 45 minutes. And at first, we kind of decompress and summarize, what we thought. I wanted to get their thoughts on what was said. And Steve had a different take, but I liked his take, and we all had a consensus take. And I'll share that, because it ties into kind of I don't want to hype it as something, I think, but it was something was said that what I thought was really, really good and insightful into what Beckett is actually trying to say. And so my first takeaway, so I'm going to, and what was funny is I at one point I had a brain aneurysm and I lost my train of thought, and basically kind of had to stop and like I lost my train of thought. And Beckett kind of did the same thing at one point. He got confused on something, so I don't know how all the edits are going to come out. I don't know what's going to be said. So I might talk to some things that may not make it into his edits. I'm not sure, but there was so much said that he's going to have to take some things out for sure, and how he condenses it, but we'll see. So my first takeaway is actually just on Dr. Beckett himself. He's a very impressive individual. I ended up getting to where Steve Taft was. All I ever heard, I've watched his podcast. I've done my research on listening to him and how he thinks and talks. But obviously, when you're talking to someone, it's a different take. And Steve Taft has the highest respect for him. That's one thing I really got with Steve. Steve very much was like, this guy is a good guy, and he was really good for the hobby, regardless of the spot. Coming away from this, wow, I got to the exact same spot. Think about how impressive he's highly intelligent. And the biggest thing about this, and Star folks, you're going to want to hear this, is that he listened. He came in and he really was trying to make this like, how can this get better? And he was open to that and trying to do it. Most of it ended up being explaining what he did, but it was kind of interesting. Like one thing that my suggestion, he even brought it up. He said, so, and Ryan, you said about, making the 86 Fleer. Okay. If the Star is the rookie and RC, if I would have put FFC on it, it becomes alphabet soup. It becomes this thing where, people were against that. And then that creates some problems, because then you can't just do it right here. Now you got to do it all over the place. So it was kind of interesting. I started figuring out and piecing, he's not agreeing. He's listening. He's trying to go, okay, maybe FFC should have been on 86 Fleer, and we're going to try and work through that. Maybe that is, but that brings its own problems. Maybe it's not powerful enough. I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but that's kind of the thing, because he didn't disagree with that. He basically said one of the biggest things about that, though, is it's all these things. He has all these considerations, and that's one of the things he's really trying to say, throughout all this and all the things that he's seeing, which again, when we go back and forth, I call, he calls me out on things, I call him out on things, and quantifiable things. And I'll say, that's not quantifiable. You can't point to that and say that, that's something that it can take in and use, and then take that across time kind of thing, or is usable. And, we kind of get there. But again, the whole thing is, my point here is that I found he was listening, and he let us talk, let us finish. It wasn't that thing of him trying to tell Star people, hey, this is the way it is. And that's the way you need to take it. Quite the opposite, actually. He's basically saying, kind of, I had limited options. There's a lot of voices in my ear. And, we can get to where we debate the classifications and stuff, but at the time, realize what's happening. And I've heard some of the same stuff before, and I was prepared for it. But I found out the takeaway I got from him just, was that he genuinely is listening to folks in the hobby, whether or not, he agrees with them. It is impressive. He brought 3 people on who disagree with him. And, especially like listening to my, channel. Can you imagine like someone, he's this huge person in the hobby, listen to someone's channel and disagreeing, and then go, you know what? I'm going to give that guy time, and I'm going to, help explain. And that just is mad respect. So, I came away just going, if he had a business, I was like, you know what? I would work for that guy. I could see that guy being a success, and he was, and some of those traits came out. So, I did get to where Steve Taft was, and I actually, for people who might meet him and whatnot, I think you'll come away with the same thing. So let's slam him. No, just kidding. Let's talk about some of my other takeaways from, and we'll talk through some of the points that we discussed. So one of the things that we discussed is, kind of those, kind of the standard, one of the standard things that he tried to clarify that we, kind of a point counterpoint spot was, describing national distribution. What's nationally distributed? And he really focused on the whole thing, and kind of his theme was, it needs to be a major manufacturer, and what, quantifies as that. And, his assessments of Star, kind of in, let me back up for a second, nationally distributed, and him basically saying nationally available, because I pointed out to him, like, wait a minute, this was nationally distributed. You could at any given point contact them, or a card shop could contact them from any point in the United States and basically get the cards. And that was possible. It just wasn't happening on the scale that you wanted it to, because again, no demand for basketball. In some cases, I did see this for Beckett, is he was kind of using the no demand for Star kind of as he wanted to. That was one thing that I would kind of point out to him again. It's like, you can't use it here and then use it to defend one of your other points. And I did see that a little bit, but not overtly. But he did acknowledge, right, that we all kind of agree with that. There really was no demand for basketball, but that is what I was stating was kind of creating this situation. It's a startup company. I said that to him. And, for being nationally distributed, it can't be at CVS, everything, that demand wasn't there for that. That's why in '82, there was nothing, but there was no, that context has to be taken into account, and it's not going to compete with Topps, or what baseball was doing at the time. And, we did say that, hey, Topps had to start out too. It's not like they started out as this huge thing. They got to grow. So there's kind of like, you have to be able to give a startup a chance. And what if Star had a 10-year license instead of a 3? They would have grown. They would have had all these things. And what if they had grown into Topps? And you can't discount those what ifs. It isn't what happened, but that has to be there. You need to have the same rules for all companies. They all need to be given a chance. Just because it wasn't, again, those contexts were there at the time. There was no demand. That's what created the context for a startup, kind of thing. I didn't get to say that specifically. I would have said it, worded it that way, but just kind of saying that was just, something that was brought up. And so one of the other things that was interesting that he said was, and again, I want to highlight that he's struggling with this. This wasn't an easy thing. He's really trying to show that, these decisions and the ramifications of them, creates things that he too is not comfortable with. Like he's not, like he called out the Stockton, the kind of the 5th year card being the rookie card. He basically said that, he's like, look at the Stockton, he's like, that doesn't sit well with me. He worded it a little different, but he did, acknowledge it. Again, he's not trying to like hide around things. He's just trying to explain things, but also saying that, this created problems. This is a problematic area, or this was is obviously kind of just a unique thing. That's one thing I stopped in the middle of. I kind of said, this is a very unique story and situation. And I do understand that. We also talked about the question was brought up that, hey, if you had the magazine in, '85, would you have labeled this ERC? And he, and I don't mean this negatively. I think that, I don't know if he wasn't prepared for it. He really did, because his answer was kind of like, he basically said, I don't know. And he never thought about it because it wasn't a consideration, because, there was such little demand. He's not going to make a monthly. It's very different than, obviously, I think I stated that, and he kind of acknowledged that as well. That the demand is so different between baseball and basketball. As I've said before, they weren't called sports cards back then; they were called baseball cards. People collected baseball cards. So, and that does, but all of this does matter, and all shows into the context. But that was talked about a bit too. But that being said, I didn't get a chance to say, well, if you had, this would have been one of those self-reinforcement themes that you talk about, even if you didn't classify it here. Simply the fact that it exists, like in the annual or something like that, if it was taken down, written down and whatnot, that's the only card, and it's the only licensed card that exists at the time, and it's basically, I want to say documented, but that would be the only card at the time. So that in itself, a point in time, it would have been a self-reinforcing. Okay, so to switch over to Dave's takes, I'm going to sum up what Dave said. Dave basically said, I think he was a bit too biased against Starr, which it's kind of funny. This comes down into a bigger debate, but it showed that Dr. Beckett was trying to say this. I mean, I don't know if there's just kind of pointing two sides, one side of the coin. And what's odd here is I don't want to say I'm somewhat neutral here, but I actually see Dave's bigger point. But he kind of said, hey, I want to say I side with Dave's bigger point, the bigger point kind of getting into major manufacturer. But Beckett points out all these things, and he has a laundry list, and it's lengthy, that he doesn't like. The Starr Company was viewed as this small, and it wasn't quote unquote good. It had all these things, and it just was lacking in a lot of areas. And at the same time, Dave noticed that, well, you relied heavily, he said, Dave's question was, you relied heavily on dealer surveys that weighed into your decision for these classifications. But, well, as you stated, and Beckett states this, there's, 50 to 100 Starr cards for every, or 50, 100 Fleer cards for every Starr card. Well, if you do these dealer surveys, then obviously it's going to be overwhelmingly for the Fleer. And I think Dave has a point there that's valid. But the bigger kind of theme that this turned into was, Starr not being a major manufacturer, which is one of Beckett's main points. He's really trying to say that. And that was a huge factor of, if not the factor of it not being a rookie card. But I would also say it was the license holder, and companies have to start somewhere. Topps had to start somewhere. The industry to innovate and to grow every industry needs startups. If you're not considering them because they don't have the money or the power of whoever is comparable at the time, you will simply make people not want to do startups or to join the hobby or to innovate. That's there. You have to have that as a consideration, that a startup company needs to be that. And you kind of say, well, I did. I ended up putting them in, or Beckett says this, he's like, I did. I ended up putting them in, even though I did not like all these things, I did put it in. So, and we're kind of, the rest of us, or the thing is, well, you kind of had to, they're the licensed card. And that's what he's trying to show here is wow, but at that time it was really frowned upon. And we had all these other examples where it doesn't work out. So I think that's where a lot of the crux of the debate kind of lies, is this viewpoint of a major company and what they're, should and shouldn't be doing and how it fits into the classification. And from a data, kind of I want to say a very black and white perspective, data perspective, it shouldn't matter. These are kind of these things. I get that they kind of do, but for a weighting, that much of a weighting factor that was placed into it, I wouldn't have done. So I find Dave's points here valid, but I do see what Beckett was saying, and especially for how it was weighted at the time. Okay, here's where things get good. Okay, so I'm going to give you Steve Taft's take after actually I kind of give the most interesting thing of the entire talk here. So much the fact that and what's really interesting is Beckett brought this up, and I brought it up at the end and was like, okay, did I hear this right? And before you take off with this, I don't want to put words in his mouth. This is going to be the spot that gets really interesting for folks. And I don't want this to be taken out of context. I want to talk to him again a little bit more on this on Monday, because I think that I have a couple questions for him and kind of looking at this. But this is really where I was kind of seeing his mindset of listening, trying to tie it in. And then I'm going to give Taft's takes. So I'd have to listen to exactly what was said, but Beckett more or less said, hey, maybe this is like the mantle. Maybe the first card is the true rookie card, and the second one is just the, kind of like I don't want to say pseudo rookie for some, and or just but the very, very popular card. And I think me, Steve, and this is where there was like this all of a sudden this very big quasi agreement. Me, Steve, and Dave are all on board with that makes sense, like this parallel here. And it kind of surprised me to hear that, kind of him saying it's a, I want to say a true rookie card, but that, that just being thought of as the Bowman, that's the true rookie card, kind of that thought process. He didn't, but when I brought it up again, he didn't want to say, it's not the exact same thing. It's kind of like that, and putting it into that context. Like, hey, I'm willing to work with this and figure it out more than anything. And let's analyze this, and maybe that's the way it fits in the hobby now. So obviously that was kind of like the eye opener for me, and kind of like, yeah, let's work on this, and I think that's actually what started and made kind of the session very, very I don't want to say easy to do, but it was much easier to know that he was kind of looking at solutions and trying to figure out ways instead of dictating them. It's kind of easy to think that he's gonna want to do that, but he didn't. And again, impressive. So when Steve Taft's take on this was afterwards was, I said, whoa, he said this, that's a big deal. I expected there to be more kind of what I've heard before, a little more, I don't want to say pushback, but it's this way. And he wasn't. And Steve said, I think Beckett very much keeps is very on top of what's going on in the hobby. He stays on top of it, and he knows it. And I think he's acknowledging what a lot of people are saying, and he sees it, and he's kind of, he's definitely putting in that knowledge and adapting to it. And all three of us saw that and agree. So we'll see what comes out, with, again, Beckett's thing in terms of saying that and seeing it. But again, don't run off and say, this is what Beckett said. But, it's definitely going to be, I want to say a slight change in from what I understood his thinking to be. With that being said, now I'm going to, Jim, if you're listening, assign you homework for Monday, and it's kind of 2 questions for you, and it's just classifications, and it kind of comes down to us trying to maybe work and find it. If you didn't have that XRC bucket to put it in, what would you have called it? That's one question that I would ask. If you didn't have an XRC to put it in, and there were no tops traded, what would you have done here? I'm a little curious. And also, if I was on your team and you said, hey, Ryan, what is this? And I would say the 101 has to be an RC. I almost don't care what you do with the FLIR, but it's going to matter. But the 101 has to be an RC. So let's think of what solution. What is your next? If you labeled the 101 an RC without an asterisk, what do you think the next best solution would be on that 86 FLIR? What would you have put? Would you have done RC asterisk? Would you have done FFC? Would you have created like a new thing for like pack pulled, or randomized pack pulled, RPC, FRPC, alphabet soup? I know it might be that, but I'm just kind of curious as to your thoughts on what you would do there. So Another thing that was kind of big before I end this is that Steve actually threw out a whole different category. I'm going to let him talk to that when he comes on the channel, but he threw out a classification idea. At first, I was kind of like, well, it kind of fits another classification. Dave and I were kind of like, but the more I thought about it, it's like, for what was trying to be done at the time, I can see the similarities in thinking with Steve and with Beckett. They both kind of shared this, kind of some similar thought processes. And the classification would Beckett actually liked it, and they kind of could it be used? The more I started thinking about it, there were more aspects. It was more likable. There's things I don't like about it for sure. But it's definitely like, it's that same kind of theme though. Was Beckett was willing to listen to ideas that made sense. He was willing to kind of go, um, again, it wasn't that whole thing of shut down. And I thought it was Steve kind of threw that out. It's Steve kind of looking at it, because Steve takes a little different stances. He actually agrees with me and Dave, like, hey, the Star 101 should be an RC, like, not debatable. Like, that is an RC. Do whatever you want after, figure something out. And that's where it gets difficult. But this one's crystal clear. And I think that's where we kind of came to. But actually, I know that us three came to that. And I think Beckett's like, okay, but I have to, this 86 Fleer has to be something more. It is something more. And if I'm classifying in that point of time, I need good ideas. I need things that work. So even for you people out there, anyone watching, like, if you did make the 101, ask yourselves that, thinking in that context and in that point of time, what maybe would you have labeled it at? What would you have done? And that's, to get everyone thinking and to kind of like, hey, don't just be like, yours doesn't work and then, kind of don't have solutions. It could be that it's nothing, and again, I'm actually more okay with that. If it makes the 101 the RC, that solves the bigger problems to me. That is the crux of my thing, right there. And I still stand by that. But it's definitely looking at the problem different. Okay, if we're kind of tasked with coming up with something, if it's not this, and you're trying to you're hired by this company and they're saying, make this work. Okay, you think that's the RC, the 101's the RC, at least help me make the 86 Fleer work, because I have a lot of folks who need this to happen. What would you do? So again, we're kind of in the middle of this rookie card revolution for Jordan. I don't know, it's this really neat thing to see this change after such a long period of time. And it's really, really exciting to be a part of it. I feel blessed. I feel like I was in a moment literally yesterday when I stopped when I was talking to all four. When you have those moments, like maybe you're in a campfire or something, and it's just this really great moment to kind of look out on the scenery and go, wow, this is really cool. This is kind of like a point in time. This is a spot. I really had that with this, because I kind of felt like I was working to help the hobby for a minute. Some people would say, no, you're going against me. I'm not. I'm really, it's a really cool place to be, to, I don't want to say try and make the hobby more understandable or more workable. And it's just definitely really cool to be a part of. So anyway, like, subscribe, and then I will see you at the next video.